what's up guys? My name is Zach and today I am driving a 2009 Chevy Cobalt XFE. Up front is a 2.2 liter inline 4 and down below is a 5-speed manual transmission. Now I am super excited to be driving this Cobalt for two reasons. First of all, I always like driving Recession era GMs. This is kind of what I grew up with and grew up around, and this is a pretty clean example of one. But the second reason is the fact that this is the XFE trim level, meaning extra fuel efficiency. So this car was built and designed to push the best fuel economy they could without using a hybrid system. And we'll talk a lot about that towards the end of the video. But if you would like to submit your own vehicle and have it reviewed here on the channel, just like Owen did with his Chevy Cobalt, you can head on over to my website, zachpradel.com/submit. It's a quick and easy submission form. It takes under a minute to fill out, and I come out to you. And if you'd like to see all my videos weeks or sometimes months in advance, you can head on over to my Patreon for only $5 a month, as well as there's exclusive audio content. But let's get back to that 2.2 liter inline 4. Well, it's the Ecotec 2.2, and they used it in several other vehicles during the time. However, 2009 is actually a pretty important year because it got variable valve timing, which not only upped the horsepower to 155 from 148, but it added a little bit of extra fuel economy because of that as well. So very, very nice to see that. And again, this car was geared quite literally towards more fuel economy. Like I said, paired to it is a 5-speed manual transmission because in this era, that was the most fuel efficient way. GM had tested some CVTs in the early 2000s, specifically with their Saturn vehicles like the Ion, but they actually sent out an "I'm sorry" letter to Ion owners because the transmission was so bad, and they gave them instructions for what to do when they brake, not if they brake. So modern CVTs are used for fuel economy, but back then, the 5-speed manual was the best for it, so that's what they used. It also has a taller gear ratio, again, for better efficiency. Last but not least about the drivetrain, of course, the Cobalt is still front-wheel drive. How does it feel to drive the Chevy Cobalt XFE? It's not exhilarating, but because of the manual and because of the VVT 4-cylinder, it can be fun if you want it to be. Now, of course, that does kind of ruin the fuel efficiency aspect of the vehicle, but you can drive it in a fun manner. The steering is a little bit heavy. The shifter's a little unforgiving, very American in that way, but honestly, it's not bad. Visibility is good as well. The Cobalt isn't very large, so you don't have to deal with big car problems. I like it. I really, really do. With that stuff out of the way, let's talk about the interior. Well, in front of me, I have 3 gauges. Off to the left is my speedometer. In the center is my fuel, and off to the right is my tachometer. That's it. Clean, simple, easy. On the steering wheel, we do have some pages and selectors for the little information gauge and the tachometer, but that's it. And off to the left, we have a climate control vent, gauge dimmer switch, and a little cubby. Moving on to the door, we have manual mirrors, latch get in and out, and manual windows. This was done so the vehicle could remain as light as possible, again, for the best fuel efficiency. Moving into the center, we have 2 climate control vents with the hazard switch pushed off to the far left, and our standard GM radio. We saw this in so many vehicles. Even Saabs had these radios of the era, so very, very familiar there. And down below, we have our climate controls, where to send it off to the left, fan speed in the middle, and temperature to the far right, as well as defrost and max AC. Then we do get a 12-volt outlet and cup holders, so we'll do a big friggin' bottle test, but as we've tested Cobalts and G5s in the past, it unfortunately fails. Then we do have the shifter. The shifter looks a little bit nicer than a basic standard shifter that you would see in a lot of other vehicles. It's not just this dumb plasticky rubbery knob. It actually has some stitching to it, which looks nice, which is kind of odd to see because the rest of the car is so bare bones and basic, but it's felt nice in my hand and I don't have any worry about it. Down below, we get another 12-volt outlet, the parking brake, and then the seats. The seats are cloth and they are manual. However, I've always enjoyed them them. You know, GM seats of this era, especially with the G5 and the G6 from Pontiac, the Malibu, the Impala, all those vehicles tend to have pretty comfy seats. GM isn't a pure company. They have their faults, but seats have never been one of them. However, speaking of seats, even though this is a two-door, we do have back seats, so let's go do a backseat review. All right, because everyone gets super angry with me if I get into a coupe on the driver's side, I'll do it the passenger way. Yeah. Never once has this ever been graceful. But we're in the back of the XFE Cobalt, and honestly, once I am back here, it's not terrible. Could I ride back here to, sorry, I have my glasses on. Could I ride back here to 7-Eleven or to a restaurant with my friends? Of course. But this is a big downside of the coupe. My head actually isn't hitting the ceiling, but one pothole, and I am concussed. No features, no amenities back here, but that's no surprise because there's no features or amenities up there. So, you know, there's that. Let's hop into the very back. We'll take a quick look at the trunk and cargo space, and then we'll talk about the looks. All right, around the back of the XFE Cobalt, and one key, not even a clicker or anything like that. Lift it up, and there you go. Kind of a small opening, but a pretty good sized trunk. So I'm not too worried about what you can fit in the trunk itself, but the opening, the mouth, if you will, just wasn't that good. So once you're in, it's fine, but getting in might be a struggle, but that's the trunk of an XFE Cobalt LS. Now we gotta talk about the looks, and I like the look of the Cobalt. I don't think it was any stellar. I liked the fact that you could even get coupes, because as we'll talk about later on, coupes are pretty much extinct from Chevy's lineup, but you could also get a four-door Cobalt at the time as well. Unfortunately, there was no Cobalt hatchback, but you had some options, and this is just the coupe variant. This also came on steel wheels, again, for that efficiency. This has hubcaps on it, so just something to note. With all of that being said, let's get on to my final thoughts. What do I think driving the Chevy Cobalt XFE? Well, it's always fun for me to be back in the seat of another older GM car. I grew up driving a Pontiac G6 in 07, so a lot of this stuff was shared with it. I put 80,000 miles on that car, and I loved it dearly, and so I get some of those memories back with this. The Cobalt was a good car. However, let's talk about the XFE, the important part of this review, the efficient part, or alleged efficient. Well, the Cobalt was stuck in kind of an odd era. As the 2000s progressed, there was a higher and higher emphasis on fuel economy, on green energy, on emissions and the environment. And so a lot of companies started experimenting with hybrids. GM, of course, was one of them. They had a hybrid Saturn Vue. They had the hybrid Tahoe, Escalade, and Yukon. They pioneered EVs of the modern era back in the 90s with the GM EV1. But hybrid technology hadn't progressed enough to smaller vehicles. Batteries were heavy and expensive. And so if you wanted something affordable that was going to be fuel efficient with, at the time, modern safety standards, there wasn't a whole lot you could do. Hybrids had to be heavy and had to be expensive. And when this vehicle came out, there was already a plan to phase it out by 2010. So GM didn't want to put money into this to develop a hybrid or to develop anything that new. So they decided to create this stripped out version of the Cobalt, the XFE, for added efficiency, but really it just lacked a bunch of options. And it worked. It got up into the 30s for miles per gallon, and people could get them. It still has a driver side and passenger airbag and side curtain airbags, which were big and add a lot of weight. You know, people always want the old Geo Metros and Honda CRXs of the late 80s and early 90s because those were extremely fuel efficient. But people forget that those were built out of recycled Coke cans and would crumble if a new SUV even grazed it. This was, at the time, a safe car and had the modern requirements to be on the road with other SUVs. The Geo Metro, the Yugo, the CRX, they never had to share the road with giant vehicles, with giant SUVs, at least in terms of daily cars. Mom and Dad had a Taurus wagon. Mom and Dad maybe had a Chrysler minivan, but minis in the name, they weren't that huge. It wasn't until the late 90s that we saw the rise of the Tahoe and the Yukon for daily driver purposes. So this had to be an efficient car that could deal with that modern traffic. And at the end of the day, it worked. It worked as well as they could make it work. And so this is what fuel efficiency looked like before the hybridization era. Now we have Corolla hybrids and CX-50 hybrids, and everything you want could either come in a plug-in or a standard hybrid or electric. But in 2009, during the recession, that wasn't the case. And so this is a beautiful example of the best that they could do for the time. They were limited by the technology of their era. Now, I know I'm speaking as if GM of 2009 was the Babylonians or the ancient Greeks, but it's true. Battery technology has come a very long way in the last 16 years. And so this was it. This was an efficient little car from the recession era. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Huge thank you to Owen for letting me borrow his Chevy Cobalt XFE for today's video. He has been absolutely wonderful to work with, and I appreciate him fitting me into his schedule. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Don't forget to rate the video, comment on the video, and subscribe if you really liked it. Take care, guys.